Hi, Ambers. We're really sorry about how long this one's going to be. And yes, that's very much what she said.
It is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to What the Trans.
What the Trans.
I am Ashleigh, and with me are Flint.
Hello.
And Alyx.
Hello.
How are you both doing?
I'm doing groovy. I had a good time off, which involved a tattoo, which is I'm very excited for. I'm not gonna. I'll tell the people what it is when it's fully done. But it's there was very, very good. It's been a long time coming. It's been a design I've wanted for ages. And then other than that, Bolter, which was sick. But I'll get into the juicy details of that when you've updated me on how all of you's doing.
So how about you, Alyx? How goes the house move?
The house moves are going very interestingly. I mean, we've recently done the tiling for the kitchen. That's all really nicely lined up. It's got all the tiles in the right place. My mum's done a really good job of it. She spent a whole evening doing that last night.
My mum's actually really good at tiling and doing the grout for the tile. And just, when it comes to redecorating stuff, my mum has always been very much on the case. It's one of the things I respect tremendously about her is her ability to do tiles.
Is there a trend I'm getting?
She's just a good tiler. That's amazing. I love that. What a specific thing.
So, dear listeners, if your mum's a good tiler, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing, back in the 70s or the 80s, there wasn't much else to do of an evening but to just do some tiling.
Yeah.
It's their version of MySpace.
Exactly.
My tile.
Yeah.
To talk about what's on your wall, it's very literal.
Oh, definitely. She was definitely good at getting it straight, though I think when we went to doing the closet in my room, all the shelves were a bit wonky, but what's not straight in a closet, right?
So how have you been, Flint?
I've just given my little. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Oh yeah. Yes, very very good, Alyx. Just full disclosure, dear listener, this is our second attempt at recording. We had to do one about an hour ago. It went a bit wrong for reasons that I'm not going to go into.
It would be so long to explain.
So Alyx has already told that joke.
Yeah.
So this is only to the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, we thought we'd give it the reception it deserved. I'm kidding. That was really mean.
That was so cruel.
Really mean of me.
That was such
sorry.
Regina George energy for a second.
Joke's on you. That joke went well down on my blue sky, so at least I got my mileage out of it.
Fantastic.
Okay, all right.
That's what
Well,
we love
shows
to
what
see.
I know.
At least someone recognises my genius.
All right. So before Flint regales us with tales of the festival circuit, I just want to talk about Stargate SG-1 for a minute.
Please
now,
do.
Obviously, it's a TV series, but the reason I want to talk about it is because it's also a role-playing game. And so I am playing the sort of commander of my SG team. We're going to go for... It's not an SG team, it's a PG team, and we're going to be PG Team 13. So we're PG-13, which means there is no swearing allowed in the games.
Oh, shit.
Minimal blood.
Yeah. No, none of that. But that's fine, because I've chosen to be, a British captain. Captain Lister. And yes, I'm going to be doing the accent, and I'm absolutely going to say "smagging hell."
That's amazing, because you know what? I'm going to be seeing Craig Charles hopefully next month. For
the funk.
It's at a jazz and funk festival. He's doing a Craig Charles funk and soul club set, along with people like Ezra Collective and Marabou State. So exciting time.
Marabou State's cool. No, sorry, I love Marabou State.
Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm psyched.
So the other thing is that so Nadia works at somewhere where there's a few fruit and veg stalls, and one of them just gave her a bunch of vegan marshmallows the other week.
Ooh.
And so we made some Rice Krispie cakes with them. You know,
Nice.
because we had a shitload of marshmallows and what you're going to do with them, right? So we made a load of Rice Krispie cakes, and she took in like half a dozen of them to the people that had given her the marshmallows, and they gave her a load more, saying, "Can we have some more of those Rice Krispie cakes, please?" So we've got a fudge full of Rice Krispie and Cocoa Pops cakes.
This is
Oh,
amazing.
that is delicious.
This is mutual aid in action.
They're fucking mint.
So it sounds like you've had a delicious time with vegan
Yeah, very
marshmallows.
much so. Very much so. So, yes, now's the time. Flint, how was Balta?
Balta.
Blatter? Balta.
Okay. No. So bittersweet to sum up, because the most trans-inclusive festival I've ever seen within my immediate experience, certainly out of festivals that don't like signify themselves as a queer space first and foremost. And it was the last ever one. So I kind of want to get on record the cool, amazing trans things that I saw, and just a couple of things that were so weird, even though they're not trans, I can't not speak about. Just to have it on record, because the space is now gone and I am sad, and I've spent my time crying. I'm now at the acceptance point of the grief stage, and yet. So here's the thing, right? There's always been a Miss Balta like drag competition every year, which is very cool. It's very fun. And I've seen it before, and it's great. Like, there's in general a very trans positive atmosphere. It's a very deliberately, outwardly, politically active space. It started in the free party scene, and I love that because it's kept those roots throughout until the last season. Like, I've seen DJs that I've seen in free party scenes at like on big stages at Balta, including some from like where I'm from, which is just amazing because it's like seeing people that you don't, you know, normally get to see on like a big stage with all like big lights and set pieces and whatnot, and they're there and you're like, yes.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, like the first really cool thing that I spotted that was specifically trans. And the funny thing is, I didn't set out to be like, oh, I'll come and talk about, I'll see what things I can find and talk about. It's just, I saw so much stuff, I was like, I can't not speak about this on the pod now. First of all, Trantasia. There was a microstage called Trantasia. Yeah. And it's a collective that wants to, I spoke to them a bit and they said they want to start trying to get some things up, hopefully in Europe. But they had cabaret, drag, they had performance art, they had DJs. The sign, like, at the back of the stage was just, like, a sheet that had spray painted the word ACAB on it.
Nice.
And the acts were amazing. There was like, bunting of pride flags and everything. It was beautiful. It was really beautiful. And it's right in the middle of the stage of like, the walking to and from places, you know what I mean? And one of the coolest things that I saw was this particular performance piece by someone who I actually already follow, a gender criminal, did an amazing spoken word piece, performance art piece. It's quite hard to explain, but it started off as like a spoken word piece that was all about like faces and showing faces and like being present, and it was this beautiful thing. We were all like sat down, and then they encouraged us to stand up slowly, one by one, would like grab one of our hands and like gently lead us up and gently lead us up. So we're all standing together, and then like asked us to hold hands with each other, and then like hug each other. And it just ended up in a massive group hug where we're all crying. And it was like bittersweet because crying because there was just a really beautiful, wonderful release. Like, I am not doing this piece justice. I am not. It was this beautiful release of like just reminding you that you are here, you are human, you are with community. There's love within that, and that's beautiful. I get choked up thinking about it now, and that being mixed as well with this sense of like I've experienced here at this space, and that was on the Friday, and I was like, okay, well, I can tell how this is going to be by the end of the fucking weekend. But it was really beautiful. It was really touching, and it was genuinely wonderful. And there were so many other acts as well that were phenomenal. There was a drag act that was fantastic. I cannot remember the specifics, but I remember there was this twisting on its head of a particular kind of audio that with the outfit that she was wearing of like a nifties 50s housewife that was doing this kind of like almost serial killer-esque routine. It was all twisted up and very cool. And there's another stage that's a bit bigger, and it was not too far from it, called Phlegmgasm. At Phlegmgasm, there was an act that I spotted the name of called 7-Year Waiting List. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that's... I wonder what that could be related to, right? So I was like, I've got to go. And it's... The act was amazing. They were like... It was just this one person armed with a microphone and a lot of emotion. And it was, I don't know, there was something so interesting about it, because at first it's like, you know, noise punk, where it's, you know, there's inherently a lot of this like screaming and moving in and out of the audience, and this kind of like, you don't really know what's gonna happen next. It's fucking great. It's electric. And then, with the between that, there was these little moments of like snapping to a very sort of normal sounding audio or a bit of a very like cheesy pop song, and then that would get sidetracked by this screaming, wailing, flailing, throwing themselves about. It was fucking amazing. And as more people were drawing in, I was just sat there like there inherently became this almost performance art aspect of it, where it was like, the act was called 7-Year Waiting List. This person is screaming in anguish, in wailing, in, you know, and in this like cathartic release, and that's drawing in a crowd who are watching it. And it's like, it's just, as someone who's part of a community where we spend so much time screaming out into the void, and sometimes the only hope we get is maybe more people will see it this time, it just felt very fucking poignant. And that was really, really cool.
It's like you're putting it all into it.
Yeah, and it reminded me of like some of the cool like kind of performance art stuff that we've seen in the past. And then Saturday was Scottish Gabba Punk Day. It was one of my favourite... I say Scottish Gabba Punk Day because I've been mentioning that I've been crocheting, right? I've been crocheting a lot.
Yes.
I've been crocheting clown ballies, balaclavas that are like got clown ruffles and like horns and like piercing rings in them and stuff. And I made a couple for Hang the DJs. I've made a Newcastle one. I've made, there was like a prototype one that I made. I made one for myself, obviously. It's all green. It glows in UV. But I made a couple for Scottish Gabba Punk when they got, like, announced on the lineup again. And this time they were going to be playing at Jigsaw, which is a much bigger stage. I was like... Because we'd already mentioned, like, oh, we're going to be there all as clowns. And then I was like, to celebrate, do you want some free clown ballies? And they were like, yeah. So I made them for them in, like, iconic fucking Iron Brew colouring. So it was, like, half orange, half blue split. And I made it for them. And I was like, oh, I'll just bring it. If you're comfortable with that, I'll just bring it to when you're playing, and I'll just, like, get them to you then, because I'll probably be barrier anyway. And they're like, yeah, that's perfect. That works great. So I took my sign that I've taken to protest, because they also have signs. They'll hold up signs saying stuff like J.K. Rowling get to fuck and things like that in their sets. They're very fucking cool, very, very political. It's like their whole thing. So I took my sign because I was like, I know there's going to be a moment where they're going to be waving signs around and I can wave that around. That'd be fun. And I gave them the ballies, and I didn't expect them to wear them. But both of their dancers were wearing them on stage, and it was so cool. It was crazy. And then I had my sign, and this is one of those weird moments where I was like, this is one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. I was like holding the sign at the moments where they had it, and it was all very, very cool. And then one of them took my sign, like saw the sign, took it, and was like waving it around and that, and I got a really cool photo of it. Which by the way had a What the Trans sticker on it, so you know, promo.
Gotta get the word out somehow.
Yeah, when they handed it back to me, I was like, oh my god, thank you so much. They were like, no, I'm non-binary, thank you. And I was like, ah! Yeah.
So what did the sign say?
The sign is the one that I made for Manchester Trans Pride that says "Trans punks fuck the system."
Oh,
Yeah, that one.
smash the system.
Smash the system. That's it.
Yes.
Smash the system. Because I was really pleased with that stencil when I made it. So
Yes.
awesome, cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad they liked
Yeah.
it.
Yes, they used your stenciling.
Yeah, and like there was so many other really cool acts as well. There was Alterum over at the Robot, which is a functional robot as a stage. Alterum's part of Mums Against Donk, which is a great little queer night out in London. I say little, it's very cool. They've got really, really sick lineups. They'll have people like SpongeBob SquareWave on it and things like that. It's so cool. Boxy was there, who's just an artist who I've gotten really into recently. It's so good. There are these amazing acts. I say acts, they aren't acts. They're like groups of people that are sort of half performance artists. Sometimes they're just groups of friends that get up in all weird gear, like me and my friends. But some of them are amazing. There's the Cutie Cartel, who wear all crochet. That's fantastic. Another one is Sex Pest Control, which is really fun because they all dress up kind of like Ghostbusters. Then there's one of my favorites. One of my favorites is the Acid Folk Morris dancers. I think that's what their name is. They are Morris dancers that do it in like bright yellow and with all these cool stripes and whatnot, and they do it to like acid music. It's very strange. It's like, it is somehow one of the most British things and strangest things I've ever seen in my life, because it's like this mixing of old folklore and new vibes that's still very like counterculture. And then like, it's just sick because like bolter itself, the word bolter is an old like English word to mean like a rave, to mean like ecstatic dance, wild abandon. So like if you're at Bolter, if you're at a festival, you're having a bolter even if you're not at Bolter. And yeah, there's only two things left that I'm like, I need to tell you about. One of them is not a trans related thing, but I have to tell you about this DJ. He's absolutely, this is one of the weirdest and coolest sets I've ever seen in my life, and it was also some of the most objectively weird DJing I've ever seen in my life. Do you know the comedian Andy Kaufman?
Yes.
Oh, you
Sure.
do? Okay,
Yeah,
brilliant.
the man on the moon.
Yes. So this DJ is like Andy Kaufman is a DJ. He is like deliberately almost like the whole set was almost, how much can I make an audience put up with? This guy was like,
see.
there was one point where he played Fireman Sam on a loop for like 10 minutes. And we were all just singing Fireman Sam. No edit, no remix. There wasn't any amen breaks in it. There wasn't any 303s in it. No, fuck that. It's just straight up Fireman Sam for 10 minutes. And it was like every time that we would repeat it and still keep dancing and still go into singing it again, he was laughing at us more and more and more and more. And it's like, I don't know if you're playing a prank on us. I don't know if you're not. Like, it's just this wild thing of like, I don't know if you're even the DJ at this point or just some absolutely wrecked fella who's gotten up on stage. There was another moment in his set where he was like, oh, I forgot my USB, and he's like really panicked. And then he managed to get, like, someone came up with a USB, or he managed to get a USB, I can't remember now. But he was like, I got the USB, and I was like, yeah! And then he puts in the USB, and it's just like some really slow music or something, and then he was like, I may be misremembering this with the fireman sound, but whatever. He puts in this USB, and then there was this moment where all of this like ambient music came in, and he starts singing, we love you, Spider-Man, we do. We love you, Spider-Man, we do. We love you, Spider-Man, we do. Oh, Spider-Man, we love you.
We love you, Spider-Man.
And, oh, yeah, and you got it, because it would repeat. It would repeat. And we're all chanting it. And again, the more we're chanting it, the more he is absolutely cackling at us. And then in between these bits of sheer silly madness, he would just be dropping some of the most filthy fucking, like, breakcore shit. Wild. And the final thing of all of it. First of all, there was the Period Vampires, a very queer, inclusive space that had queer people in it that was all about providing free menstrual products. That was fantastic. And the final set of the entire weekend was Mandy Dexterous, who is a non-binary DJ who's one of the orgies of Bolter, has been there since the beginning. And their set was phenomenal because they had, as the backdrop for their entire set, a giant trans flag. And they were they gave like a little speech about it. And were like, you know, this space means so much to me, and, you know, this space means so much to me because of the way in which it makes things, like, because of the space and the safety it provides to people. And this giant trans flag, and then Free Palestine, and, like, That's going to be the last image some people ever have of Bolter. I ended up bumping into Gender Criminal after that set, and I had said I was thinking that, and then as I bumped into them, they were saying that to some of their friends, and I was like, it was a beautiful place, beautiful space. Thank you for letting me ramble. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. Like, I think this is why we talk about trans joy, though, because it's important to be aware that such things are possible, bleak though the things, make no mistake, are and can be. The listeners won't be able to see this, but I could see you kind of talking with your hands and like being so joyful as you're expressing all of this stuff, which has been worth it all by itself.
Yeah.
So, cool. I'm glad you had a super time.
Yeah.
I'm bummed that I don't get to go to one of them.
I'll find another one that's similar, but we'll get you there.
Awesome. Please do. Something gay and weird.
Yeah, that's my specialty.
Excellent. Okay, all right. Let's take a stroll and a roll and a perambulation of your choice, really. Down to action alley.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and start with how you should email both the Women and Equalities Committee and the Joint Committee on Human Rights at Parliament about the potential appointment of Mary Ann Stevenson to be the chair of the EHRC. More on that later, but I wanted to signpost that immediately because that's something that's really important that we can, make a difference by actually doing. More on that later.
Yeah, and I suppose for the more technically inclined, if you're looking for a job at the moment, the Good Law Project are hoping to hire a new head of tech and data to help drive their vital work. So if that's something you're interested in, you can apply for it now.
There is also, from the Good Law Project, a form to help you get in touch with your MP. It's a quite nice and simple form. I'm looking at it now, and it allows you to quickly and easily get in contact. So consider that. Yeah,
we've also got a whole bunch of other actions and writing campaigns, petitions, protests. All on our website. So check out our website. It's always at the top of the page when you go onto the homepage of our website, so check that out because there's going to be there's lots of actions that we're keeping updated. We're seeing new different things, and also we've got our own little thing on Action Alley for our own stuff actually as well this time.
Yes we do.
So we're starting to look at doing some short form videos, doing those TikToks and Instagram reels.
That's a great way. A great way to show that we are hip and with the kids. We know what we're talking about here. Yes.
Pretty much.
So if you're interested in doing that, that'd be lit.
Love it. No, but for real though, it is. I mean, it's an entirely voluntary position, but that's because everyone here at What the Trans works voluntarily. Any and all Patreon
it's all
money.
voluntary.
Any and all Patreon money only ever gets basically put aside in a pot that can help pay for equipment costs and expenses if we need to send out reports on the ground. If you have the spare time and energy and you want to kind of just be doing it for the love of it like we all are, then feel free to apply. If not, absolutely valid.
All right. Let's roll the jingle and go across the pond.
Pond hopping, we're hopping across the pond. How bad could it be?
Across the pond, yes.
First up, on the other side of the pond, is a slightly wholesome story brought to us by Erin in the Morning.
Not an afternoon.
You may be aware of the New York Times reputation among American trans people, and it's somewhat analogous to how British trans people feel about certain news outlets over here. Suffice to say that the NYT has been accused, and quite justifiably in our opinion, of contributing to the extremely hostile landscape for trans people in the US, by focusing on the anti-trans groups and people, giving them undue prominence, not providing any kind of right of reply to the trans community, and writing trans-hostile pieces in a bullshit, both-sidesy tone that makes anti-trans viewpoints seem more reasonable to the layperson. So it's definitely reminiscent of certain outlets over here, isn't it? Well, the NYT has recently put out a 6-part podcast series which is pretty widely seen as laundering anti-trans arguments. But one of the things this podcast series did was dig up old patients of gender-affirming care in Europe who were lucky enough to receive puberty blockers and try and paint the picture that blockers completely ruined their lives. Now, I'm sure you may be spotting the flaw in that logic already, but for the avoidance of doubt, they set out to tell a specific story and they absolutely told it. Inconvenient facts were ignored, any progressive or caring voices were made out to be dangerous agents provocateurs. Episodes 1 and 2 both talk to trans people who are among the first, and indeed in one case, the first, to receive puberty blockers from a Dutch gender clinic, and both interviews are with well-adjusted, balanced, and above all, happy trans people who are in their 40s and 50s now. The podcast repeatedly hammers home that these two people are different from the ones in America at the moment, and that they were treated under a different protocol. It tries very hard to cast any progress or access to improved care in as negative a light as possible. And have a guess at which world-famous clinician gets a whole episode to herself in episode 6. Of course, it's our own Hilary Cass, who is presented... Yeah, exactly. Who is presented as a reasonable and learned author of an entirely impartial and balanced medical document when, none of those things about her are true.
Yeah.
In summary then, don't bother listening to that podcast. Several of the team did, and it just made us angry at Cass all over again. As for the NYT, liberals gonna liberal, and by that I mean they enable fascism.
Yes.
Now, the slightly wholesome part that I talked about initially was that the podcast had to work quite hard, but still never quite fully managed to cover over the fact that those two trans people I mentioned were absolutely thriving. It's a familiar disconnect between how we feel about the care we're able to access and how cis people think about that care. So, this was just so fucking annoying, but it's like the NYT... The New York Times being the Times here, or really specifically being the BBC or the Guardian.
Yeah, don't listen to that podcast. Listen to ours instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think as a trans news podcast, we could definitely verify we're the most qualified in judging podcasts.
Yes, we are the first and only trans news podcast.
I don't know how true that is. Is that true?
It very much isn't. Now for something
Yeah.
a little...
This one's...
This one is sad.
Not great, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This one is sad.
So, Jonathan Joss, who is an actor well known for voicing John Redcorn in King of the Hill and Chief Ken Hatate in Parks and Recreation, was murdered at the beginning of this month. Police have tried to deny that this is a hate crime, despite the fact that he and his husband were having slurs shouted at them during the attack, and they had several complaints of homophobia to police that were ignored over a long period. They have now walked back that claim, and they are investigating. Joss was a staunch advocate for Indigenous rights and LGBT rights. Tristan Kernda Gonzalez, his trans husband, posted a statement on what happened, which you can find if you want specific details. But in that statement, we wish to highlight these words from it. When the man fired, Jonathan pushed me out of the way. He saved my life. I will carry that forward and I will protect what he built.
Yeah, this is just awful. And it really, really affected me because I really enjoy both of the characters that he has been most famous for.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And all his work in advocacy for Indigenous rights and LGBT rights and...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me by surprise as well.
Yeah. And there was a lot of really toxic reporting I found after the fact that just was deeply intrusive and very speculative. And all of it gave the vibe of, in what ways could it be his fault, which is what I fucking hate.
Yeah, looking to blame the victim.
Yes.
Well, let's carry on, shall we?
Well, I wish I could say that we're turning to better news. But we kind of would be irresponsible to not talk about the LA protests. So you may have already seen or heard news straight out of LA in response to ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, undertaking increased raids against the Latino immigrant community. Now, first serious point of context here is that LA is a sanctuary city, so people who are undocumented are supposed to have less chance of deportation and better chance of safety there. Since the Trump administration came in, it has been targeted extremely frequently. There is no easy way to say this. People are being disappeared. They are being taken from their jobs, from events, or even stores. ICE will turn up at any random moment, and then family, friends, even lawyers have had struggles getting in contact with them once taken. Now, some people are going to their immigration checks and following the rules of the system perfectly legally, only to be arrested. Some people have been American citizens who simply have been outspoken about ICE and vocally pro-immigration. Some people have been taken for as little as filming ICE while they operate in broad daylight. One of the people taken was a 4-year-old girl, and in another raid, a woman 9 months pregnant was arrested. And both of those things are according to the governor of California. Now, this is extreme and aggressive action. It is far outside the bounds of what is usually allowed, which in and of itself is already far too much in my opinion. Amnesty International's USA executive director even released a statement saying this is not about protecting communities, this is about crushing dissent and instilling fear. So people have now been turning up to prevent this violence and protest their presence. When a raid was undertaken in the fashion district, people tried to block the van that other people had been forced into, leading to protests developing. Then ICE turned up in unmarked vans at a business park near a Home Depot, which also drew protesters, including a mariachi band. The tone was lively and loud, but not disruptive. As crowds drew, people were chanting and some were filming the agents, who began tear gas and flashbang attacks and arresting people, essentially for chanting and not ignoring the blatant evil being done to their neighbours. There was no destruction at that point in time from what the LA Times article we have linked to from, they have 2 people that were on the scene, their account of what they were seeing, 2 journalists, so, you know. I have seen videos of people being hit directly with foam bullets for as little as asking to get home or asking to see a badge number. And the latter is a question that US officers must answer by law. Enforcement is blatantly disregarding their training and risking death in doing so. Now, other protests have appeared in New York, Houston, and many other places across the country, both in response to increased raids there too, and in solidarity with LA, including reports of a protest outside the ICE headquarters in New York at the time of writing. Now, remember that every video you are seeing will only be a tiny drop in the bucket of what people are up against. Remember that violence will be something that will be far easier to spread on the algorithms than community and joy. Remember, there will be narrative spins on this to call it riots, uprisings, to make it sound like it is more violent and deliberate than it is, and ultimately criminalize a community for defending itself. These are everyday people who have had enough, and when living in these violent systems like we do, no protester is able to cause more violence than what that state or system does to them and collectively to their community every day. Back in LA, the city of Glendale has ended its contract with ICE, which is exactly the kind of action that needs to be taken right now by cities and authoritative bodies. And it is one of the real goals of these protests. It is to protect their home and communities from extreme violence with the aim that the city backs its own inhabitants and recognizes that damage has only occurred after troops have been deployed, that people only get hurt after the cops start pushing them around, because there have been reports of authorities instigating and antagonizing people with the aim that any response they give in defense will justify harsher tactics. This is when tear gas, flashbangs, mass arrest, and things that can kill like foam bullets are being used against civilians. These are things that would not be allowed in war zones under the Geneva Convention. And some people that have been arrested at these protests have already been deported before their family could even secure lawyers, in blatant disregard of habeas corpus. That's the right to trial. They are putting people in a position where they have to defend themselves and then demonizing them for doing so. Now, Newsom, the governor I've mentioned earlier, has made filings in court, including the emergency request in court against Trump to block more troops being deployed against citizens. The governor's argument was that they were initially deployed only to protect federal buildings, but are now participating in the raids, and we've seen video footage of this too. And despite protests winding down, more troops would be sent in to escalate things again. But Governor Newsom is also promising that protesters will be punished to the full extent of the law for any quote-unquote criminal behaviour, which sounds grounded but is not mindful of the power dynamic that Angelenos are under right now. LA is not undertaking an uprising or an insurrection. It is trying to survive a fascist military siege as Trump keeps ordering more troops and guards down there. In my personal view, it is possible he is trying to escalate things to the point of justifying military rule. And the thing is that I finished writing there last night, and then today I woke up to more news. So, unfortunately, according to ABC News, who have a live update on their site, which we will link to, there is 4,800 activated Guard and Marine personnel in LA compared to the 2,500 troops in Iraq and 1,500 troops in Syria. So far, around 197 people have been arrested. An article for the New York Times, said the following. Mr. Trump has made clear he plans to take similar actions should protests break out in other states. Speaking to reporters, he described the military deployment in Los Angeles as the first, perhaps, of many. I can inform the rest of the country that when they do it, if they do it, they're going to be met with equal or greater force than we met right here. He told journalists that in the Oval Office on Tuesday. So, we will have to see how this develops further. He threatened to use the Insurrection Act in 2020 and never did, but he keeps calling any protests against deportations insurrections right now. The worst person to be in charge has all the power, and he is lavishing how much harm he is causing and wants to cause more. Any Americans listening, please be careful. Know that you have our love and our support. It's likely that you will have more information than us, but do not let any of this information, if it is new to you, scare you into not practicing your First Amendment rights.
All of this footage of the police and the National Guard causing the violence has reminded me of the George Floyd protests in 2020. So there was a particular one that I saw of, like, it was an Australian news anchor who was delivering a piece to camera on an American street, and you could see behind her an American police officer just raises his gun and shoots her in the leg. Yeah. What you're supposed to do with foam/rubber bullets is aim them at the ground and they will bounce into the person's legs. You're not supposed to aim them directly at the person and pull the trigger, but that's exactly what this cop did.
And I think I also saw a story of a photojournalist as well, who it literally gouged his leg, it penetrated a couple inches, he had to go to hospital. And as a photojournalist, whenever I'm taking photos of protests, that could have been me being shot in the leg for just doing my job of taking photos of what's happened.
The whole practice of foam bullets, nothing screams we would shoot protesters if we could to me more than the practice of using foam bullets at a protest.
Yes.
It has always felt like it is so close to that, but just through some weird legal mechanisms, you know, and I despise it. I despise the practice of it. Then again, I despise the practice of police. So.
Yeah. Well, you and me both. But let's bring things home. Yes, it's time to come back to the UK. Cue the disappointed crowd.
Well, this is sort of more international. It's on the way back because it connects to a lot. But yeah,
it's halfway across the pond.
So we've got a note in the script here. Amber, can we have a "Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the money?"
Where's the money, Lebowski?
Where's the money, shithead?
It's down there somewhere. Let me take another look.
That was me, I'm so sorry.
Get ready to cross something off your bingo cards, because this is a bit of news that I think a lot of us have predicted, but now it's, a little bit more verified. An investigation has found that a lot of anti-trans organisations are getting funding from fossil fuel companies and billionaires. Shell USA donated ever so slightly over $58,000 to the ADF, that's the Alliance Defending Freedom, and the guy who owns the company behind Coachella every year, which is Phil Anschutz from Anschutz Entertainment Group, he made his money in oil, and he also donated $110,000 to the ADF too. In fact, to quote an article that had the exclusive, an independent analysis of 45 right-wing groups advocating against trans rights found that 80% have received donations from fossil fuel companies or billionaires. And another quote, in case you thought that Coachella thing was a one-off: although fossil fuel billionaire Anschutz has denied that he is anti-LGBTQIA+, he is directly tied to at least 9 other conservative transphobic entities, including Colorado Christian University, the Council for National Policy, Dare to Share Ministries, and the Family Research Council, per the new investigation. So, You ever wondered where the Alliance Defending Freedom was getting all that money to spend puffing up the coffers of anti-trans group all over the world? They're getting it from the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
So we will, of course, link to the article that demonstrated all of this. But what did you think? Were you surprised when you saw this?
Remember when we saw the Pink News Awards was sponsored by fossil fuel companies?
Yes. Fossil fuel companies do quite a lot of shit.
Yeah. This is the least surprising to me. I feel like it's one of those things where, like, it is more surprising to me that they have managed to concretely, solidly get those connections just because of the nature of how these things are so covertly hidden behind shell companies and this, that, the other, and this, that, the other.
Yeah.
That's, honestly, it was more like, fucking A, you got it. You got that solid connection. Sickening. More than it was, oh my god, the money's coming from here? Who would have known? Like, we knew. We fucking knew. Now we've just got facts and figures behind it, which thank fuck for people doing this amazing research, because this is why it's needed.
Now on to...
Onward, yes.
Well, I think technically we still haven't crossed the pond yet. But at the moment...
Well, yeah, that's true, because that last one was international.
It's a long
And this
flight.
next one is international.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're slowly... The plane's slowly... Well, the boat is slowly getting there. The yacht. Boxing at the international level has been having something of a makeover, with a general move away from its crummy old sports regulator as a shiny new one steps into the ring. The old International Boxing Association, or the IBA, has been gathering controversies for years with its ties to the Russian state, allegations of corruption, and of course the whole fiasco with sex testing. So, replacing the IBA is a new regulator, World Boxing, which doesn't have years of baggage, but has already announced a mandatory sex testing policy. The sex, age, weight, eligibility policy is not yet finalised or available to read, but World Boxing has seen fit to make several announcements and start acting on the unfinished policy. So far, we know that World Boxing intends to sex test all over 18s who wish to compete in its events, and its initial tests will use blood or oral swabs. Unfortunately, there's still room for this story to get worse. Roughly half the text of the original announcement was specifically about Iman Khalif, singling her out by name. Khalif will not be allowed to participate in events until she has been sex tested under the new policy, a policy which does not yet exist. Khalif was explicitly banned from the Eindhoven Box Cup, which she had planned to attend the following week. The Eindhoven Box Cup was still able to go ahead without delay, presumably because no other athlete is being held to the same standard as Khalif. World Boxing would eventually amend its announcement and issue an apology to the head of the Algerian Boxing Federation, saying, quote, "Greater effort should have been made to avoid linking the policy to any individual." At this time, it's not known if World Boxing has apologised to Khalif herself. Sex testing in sport is wrong. It's fundamentally discriminatory and is used to stigmatise. The way World Boxing has handled their policy thus far is dishonest and disgraceful.
They're just using it as a way to kind of clamp down on people that don't fit the traditional idea of womanhood. And like, I can't help but notice that Iman Khalif is not a white person as well, and she's the person who was held up as the example.
No, exactly.
Yeah, we've mentioned before, so you probably will have heard us talk about the incredibly racist beginnings and foundations of a lot of the science that is used to dictate who can and cannot be a woman for the purposes of a sport. It's horrid and rancid.
It's their way of trying to uphold their misogynistic views, in which to hold women as this weak and unable to protect themselves and utterly at the mercy of men in which to be held. But in reality, it's these people who are trying to impose this falsehood of protecting women, when in reality their version of feminism is like completely false. And I think I've seen on news that Imaine's participation in Olympics and winning has like greatly improved take up of boxing in Algeria itself. There were some really good stories there and helping to uplift women in sports and for country and help in all those elements. And I think I saw like women's clubs were like completely out of spaces and they were struggling for getting people in. And it's an uplifting story, and it's world boxing who are trying to put a middle finger to it.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of it as well, isn't it? It's holding down some damn good competition, which is just shitty sportsmanship. In my opinion, you should want to, be the best, beat the best, and instead we're playing all these chicken shit games. So, yeah,
Fuck 'em.
We finally landed in the UK now.
We finally landed. We're back in the UK. And straight away we're hitting all the items on the bingo list this episode. And this time we have to talk about Hilary Cass. It's not her causing the damage. In fact, it's what the trans team choice for Lawyer of the Year, Reactive Ashleigh, who's not pulling any punches. Legally, however, not literally. In this case, for failing to provide materials used in the cast review, despite the fact that it should be accessible to request those under Freedom of Information requests. The information in question relates to 3 conclusions that came out of the cast review. The first one was that Cass claimed that anyone under the age of 25 cannot fully consent to treatment as their brain has allegedly not fully matured. The next was Cass's suggestion of a parallel between gender-affirming care and the troubling history of non-consensual treatments imposed on intersex people. And finally, Cass trying to make a link between trans men and exposure to pornography.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Now, the sources to these were cited, but how they reached these conclusions when writing it is a mystery. This includes documented discussions. Now, according to the ICO, Ashleigh has a right to this information, and they have sent a warning to Hilary Cass and NHS England. However, it is in doubt that either will comply, and it's looking very much like they won't. So, Reactive Ashleigh is now taking these complaints to court. She has given NHS England a deadline of 8 days, and given she had sent this letter on the 8th of June, it should be around the same time that this podcast episode releases that it'll end up in court. So, keep an eye on the news, folks.
Yeah, the conclusion about anyone under age of 25, I think I'm 24 and I own a fucking house.
Yeah, right. Bro, like you can join the army at 16. What do you mean?
Exactly.
What do you mean?
Funny story, I think I ordered a bottle of alcohol the other day, and the delivery guy came in. I gave him my ID. It said I was 24, and I was like, no, I can't give it to you. You need to be over 25. Which my dad was fortunately there to take it for me, but I was like, what the fuck?
Although the idea of you being like, no, I'm definitely old enough. Look, my dad will get it. Really doesn't sound that convincing, I'll admit.
True, actually.
but no, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you got it in the end. Yeah.
I don't know, can I be delighted at news like this, that someone's being taken to court? I'm not supposed to indulge in Schadenfreude.
Well, I don't know.
Particularly not towards a gender critical person, because apparently that's a threat.
Yeah, but apparently that's illegal, which it's not. But yeah. Well, I don't know. Is it? To me, it is more joy that Ashleigh is standing up and fighting back for what's right and is asserting.
Hell yeah.
That to me. So to me, it's more the joy as opposed to the heh. We'll see how torturous this process is made for Cass before I'm willing to be happy in that regard. But good on you. Fucking A.
We've been killing it for lawsuits recently. Like, we've got the good law one, we had...
Yeah.
Liberty. So many.
Now Ashleigh. Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
If you think that we're going to stop talking about lawsuits by the time we get to...
Losers Corner.
Then... Oh, buddy, you're so in the wrong. Because this week only, we have a bog-off deal on top quality losers. You buy one, you get one free. I said you buy one, you get one free. And if you have a loser for us, then call on 0800 What the Trans. That is 0800 What the Trans. Okay, no, don't actually do that. That is a fake number. I know that's obvious, and I know that people will know that's obvious, but I know that there is going to be at least one or two reprobates out there who would commit to the bit so hard. So I'm saying now, don't call that number. I don't know where it goes to. Yeah.
Don't call that number, bog off.
Yeah, so, okay, now that's out of my system, let's get into some pretty serious attempts at breaching right to pro. Hang on, I'm sorry, that total whiplash is crazy, and that's my own fault. That's an awful segue. You can keep this in, I'll consider it accountability.
Losers Corner.
Genuinely, this is a pretty serious attempt at breaching our right to protest. Our first loser is the EHRC by proxy. Well, sort of, kind of, really, maybe. It's actually the EHRC's landlord, okay? So just as unlikely to receive invites to Pride, but we can't say it's explicitly the EHRC that's done this, but put a pin in that. The story starts with familiar faces, yes? That's right, trans kids deserve better. The current long-time holders of the undisputed WTT Losers Corner Championship. They were holding an encampment in front of a private office building that is the base of the EHRC London office. This is one of those buildings that has many different businesses in it, so out of the literal hundreds of desks inside, only about 16 are EHRC, and trust me, that's relevant as we go on.
This Tunnel Whiplash is glorious.
I went full chaos with this one, apparently. So, the encampment lasted for just 5 days. Days that included a board game night, an open mic, and most importantly, they held a closing ceremony and farewell party on the last night, claiming, as well, that they told the EHRC when they were leaving. So, the landlords did the grounded and reasonable thing of filing an injunction and a possession order. The encampment was so short that by the time it was in High Court, they had already left. And on top of this, the EHRC landlords were claiming that they were never told about an end date. So, let's take a deeper look at that injunction, eh? Firstly, this kind of filing is actually not uncommon, that they are pretty usual, and they usually are granted by courts because it essentially boils down to, this is my property, I don't want these people here, they aren't leaving, and or, you know, if they do, they may come back, or well, realistically, it's very, very likely to come back. So the courts normally just go, yep, that's your right, and then it prevents people coming back, or maybe means sending bailiffs out to the location. No, this is something that's usually used against squats. But since you know the nature of this segment, and which part of the show they're in, then you're going to already have an idea on how this turned out, and you'll know that this wasn't usual circumstances. And a big part of that is down to the Good Law Project, who intervened in this case. So big props to them. Now, the injunction specifically was to prevent protesting on the property without the express or implied consent of the EHRC's landlords until January next year, which already is a lot, but this is much further reaching than you may first think. It would include things like you walking up to and delivering letters or petitions to their EHRC postbox. But the extra wild thing, the thing that turned GLP's head enough to get them in the ring, was that the injunction was not against TKDB. It was against persons unknown, which means it would affect anyone and everyone, regardless of whether it's trans rights related or not. You could be wanting to deliver a petition for anything. It could be to get better heating and new chairs in the office, and it would still be a protest action and therefore prohibited. Now, this would have had a completely chilling effect on the right to protest. But before people start thinking that this landlord has managed to summon up more malice than the average, from the source we have that was an anonymous bystander in the room where it happened, they came across more like they hadn't fully considered how sweeping the action they were arguing for was, or that they were, using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. But GLP are built for this kind of thing. They know the law inside out, and so when they stepped in, it made sure that a ruling which could have been seen as a formality was given full scrutiny, which ensured that the court saw it wasn't up to snuff. So we don't have the full reasons from the court yet, but we do know that one of the more important elements of getting this injunction is showing that a, quote, serious and immediate risk of return, which the landlord tried to prove by saying that TKDB had done protests before and they'll likely do them again. But here is why that's a piss-poor argument, and that's not a legal term, that's just my opinion. If you've been listening to us and following TKDB, then you'll know that they have only ever returned to the site of a previous protest a couple of times. About a year after their first action at the NHS HQ, they returned to cover the building in fake blood, demanding a release of the report into trans suicides following the blocker ban. Even the time between the encampment outside Wes Streeting's office and the Easter protest was months. So it's understandable that the court wasn't having any of that. So, who is the winner? All of us! And when I say this is a win, I mean this is a big win. A huge win. The effect this could have had would have been a horrendous loss of momentum to any possible movements. And it would have potentially emboldened other landlords to undertake similar actions. So seriously, pause for a second, and amongst all of the chaos right now, let it sink in. We won something massive. Do not forget that in the landslide of horrors that we are presenting.
Oh, and by the way, just in case anyone was thinking that because of this injunction being lost, that means that we can, go running back to Tintergill House with wild abandon and dreams of the biggest protest ever. Please do not. And I know that feels really weird, us saying hold off for a second on something like that, but just consider logistically that because this was lost on the basis that people would not immediately return, there was no immediate imminent risk of return. Obviously, if people then return really quickly to hold protests to the property itself, then this could be potentially re-argued by the landlords and it could have a more successful outcome for them, which would be disastrous for us. So just bear that in mind, please. Hold off for a little while on actually protesting on the grounds of that property.
But here's the juiciest gem in the whole scenario, right? And I saved it for last so it could get extra ripe. The landlord's argument apparently rested quite a lot on the EHRC, even though it would be pretty obvious to argue that it's affecting people who have nothing to do with them, right? Although apparently other people in the building had spoken with protesters and voiced their support for the protest, which is lovely to see. Now, we cannot say, right, that this means the landlords were working with the EHRC or doing it at their behest, In fact, the opposite, right? Like, the EHRC weren't a party in the filing. There's no evidence that the EHRC directed their landlords to do this. It's just odd. It gives a vibe, doesn't it? We can't assume anything specific because we literally don't have evidence. Except we do! Literally, yesterday, as I was writing this up, yet again, this happened twice within this fucking thing. As I was writing this up, there was a meeting that was public going on that Faulkner was present at. Now, we'll get into the details of that in due course, but I'm mentioning it now because she made the mistake, while she was in that meeting, of referencing this particular legal situation by saying that the EHRC, had been accused of not protecting the right to protest as they should. And she called that defamatory. And if you think that the Good Lord Project will take that lying down, then you're dead wrong. Because instead, Joylan Morn, KC, who, when hearing the comments, I can only imagine, said something similar to, "Oh, so it's like that, is it?" decided to release the evidence that they have that the EHRC actually did back their landlord's claim. And the following info is from his thread. So, we mentioned the legal arguments focus a lot on the EHRC, but it's worse than that. The first witness statement focuses only on the EHRC. It mentions no one else and does a full breakdown of the EHRC stance on trans rights, which is another odd thing. In the thread, it was described as tendernicious, which is our word of the week. Just joking. If you, like me, were a lowly pleb with little idea of what that word meant, looking up synonyms on thesaurus.com gives words like distorted, biased, prejudiced. And when I read it, as in when I read part of the document, it looked bigoted. Oh, look, another synonym. Yay. Now, the second witness statement isn't much better.
Actually, it's even worse, because it's from someone called Jake Theed, who not only has worked closely with the EHRC, he was only invited to one of their bloody board meetings. Okay, so those two don't look great for the EHRC, that's fine. What about the landlord's statement, okay? Well, they claimed that the only people affected by the protest were the EHRC, and that they weren't even showing up to the office, as if that's needed. When, TKBD have no history of violence whatsoever. Landlords also go out of their way to weaponise any parts of previous protests as if TKDB just wantonly caused destruction, when even in another witness statement in the same filing, they admit that protesters left everything clean and tidy. As Droylon put it at the end of the thread, if I was chair of the statutory body in charge of protecting protest rights, I would have vigorously discouraged my landlord from seeking an injunction to criminalise such protests, and I certainly wouldn't have, at the very least, actively cooperated. To which I couldn't agree more. But here's one last thing to note. Inferring from things like how much square foot the EHRC rent and the kind of lawyers the landlords called in for the job, Jordan estimates that they likely spent around £100,000 to £200,000 to fail on an injunction defending tenants that wouldn't have brought in anywhere near as much. And now, listen, obviously, the EHRC have denied that they have contributed anything to the cost, and genuinely, we are not making that accusation. To be honest, I don't think we need to when it's obvious that they got involved regardless of a penny being sent anyway. But hey, if you think that I forgot about our super special deal only available this week, then don't report me to Trading Standards just yet, because I've got the other one right here, and it's short and sweet too. So, transphobes tried to sue their union after there were protests against the showing of a transphobe film whose title is a dog whistle. Sorry, did that not narrow it down? Adult human female. Yeah, the UCU, Edinburgh University, protested it alongside students, and they got sued in a claim that it was discrimination to do so. They even tried to claim that allowing Katie Montgomery, who you'll likely know is a very cool public advocate and activist, made them feel threatened and contributed to discrimination. The fucking cheek. Well, thankfully, they failed on every single count. Fantastic.
Yeah. I managed to get a drink halfway through that as well.
I was delighted to see this fail, and fail so hard as well.
Right.
Normally, and the landlord joined in is definitely a recipe for bad news. But in fact, if the landlord hadn't joined in, we wouldn't have had this whole story, right? If the landlord hadn't said, right, we're going to sue you, and then lost the fucking case, we wouldn't have been able to laugh at them for it. So, yeah. Well done, that landlord. More like this, please.
Faulkner bringing it up during that committee hearing.
Which we're going to come on to.
Like, well done for living rent-free in Faulkner's head for that.
Yeah, like, genuinely, you've clearly got her upset on that one. She went out of her way to just, like, throw a random shot at you as if she wasn't already under a lot of fire herself. It was so much, but we'll get into it.
We're going to have fun with that.
We're trying to not speak about it because we've got so many thoughts, yeah.
We'll get there.
We've got to hold back.
But, yeah, okay, so briefly nipping about Edinburgh University then.
Yes.
So Katie Montgomery got a copy of the court filings simply because she's mentioned in it.
Yes.
And several times, in fact. But she wasn't involved in the case. She didn't have to give evidence or anything, but simply because she was mentioned several times in the course of the case, she had to receive a copy of the document. And from her, we know that it was pretty hilarious.
Yep.
Because, as you say, they failed on every single count that they tried to put in.
Yeah, and they were trying really, really hard to make it work. And it didn't, because obviously it didn't.
Yeah, like, oh, we're being discriminated against because you wouldn't let us show our hateful film. It's like, it's not the flex you think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, the court has literally said, no, try that shit somewhere else, sunshine. Obviously, they didn't put that in the filing.
No, that's a legal term. That's an actual legal term, definitely and absolutely. Yeah, try that shit somewhere else is cool. A classic legal term.
Okay, I'm definitely going to make a stencil of try that shit somewhere else, sunshine.
And if you think we're done for the HRC, no.
Nope. So now we're going to come on to the meat of this episode. The last couple of episodes have been a little bit more svelte. Not this time.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
We're back. It's a beefy one, baby, because we're talking all about the EHRC.
Yeah.
At the start of May, the EHRC Commissioner, Akua Reindorf, spoke at an all transphobes discussion hosted by LSE Law School. Just to give you a general sense of the calibre of the event, one of the other speakers was Naomi Cunningham, the chair of the Board of Trustees for Sex Matters. We'll provide a link to the full discussion, though it's frankly a bit of a grim listen. Lots of exhausting legal speak, peppered with transphobic language, and bubbling with a sentiment that they'd say worse things without the camera rolling. According to Reindorf, everything is incredibly clear, provided you're looking at it the right way. She believes that institutions, organisations, and indeed even regulators have been spreading myths, misinformation, and lies about trans rights. So,
It's a conspiracy.
It's a conspiracy.
I mean, that seems to literally be the way she's been thinking about it, though, because if everybody's been misinformed or everybody's been saying things wrong, like, you know, what are you trying to insinuate here exactly? Super annoying.
Yeah, and that's the thing. She's claiming that, you know, so many people have been misled and misinformed and lied to, right? But meanwhile, she's the person that's managed to get a Guardian headline changed twice within the same day.
Yep.
And you tell me who has got more control on information, how it's seen. Please.
Yeah, so we've taken our best shots at unpicking what she thinks is the right way to approach it. Not a fun endeavour, but I'm in too deep at this point, and there's a bit of a sunk cost fallacy approaching this, and I think it might add into our insight in the actions of the EHRC, even though Reindorf was speaking in a personal capacity, not acting in her role as a commissioner. Here we go. Reindorf asserts that prior to the Supreme Court ruling, a trans woman needed a GRC or gender recognition certificate to be considered a woman under equalities law, and that trans people without a GRC were sneakily claiming rights they didn't have because checking who's got a GRC was so heavily discouraged. There's good reason GRCs aren't asked about, notably including our Article 8 right to privacy.
Put a pin in that.
Although Reindorf skips past that pesky detail.
I wonder why.
So anyway, in Reindorf's view, the outcome of the Supreme Court ruling is that trans people with a GRC should be accommodated just like any trans person without a GRC. And trans people without a GRC haven't lost the right to be treated as their acquired sex because they never had that right in the first place. And of course, technically the letter of the law has not changed, we're just learning how it was apparently meant to be read all along. It all seems a bit Orwellian when I put it like that. I wonder if soon we'll be told that some people are more equal than others. Although, I will reiterate that Reindorf was speaking in a personal capacity. It seems wholly plausible that these views have been discussed with others at the HRC, and that we might find echoes of this argument elsewhere.
She said, foreshadowingly.
Despite this argument being disconnected from reality and feeling about as sturdy as a ball of lint. Before we abandon Reindorf and move on to the next story in our EHRC segment, there are a few other particular bits worth drawing attention to. She does not like that the government is encouraging service providers to wait for guidance, and she insists that where a service provider wants or needs to operate in a single-sex space, that cannot be done on the basis of self-ID. Reindorf summarises this point by saying, "It's men, women, and have a third space if you want."
It's me. I'm the third space. Sorry.
Reindorf is later asked about trans people using disabled toilets, and she acknowledges that it has to be a case-by-case. But nonetheless, she suggests that trans people using disabled toilets would not be appropriate in public settings. Reindorf also describes how she was thankful that the Gender Recognition Act exists because otherwise the Equality Act might have merged gender recognition and sex, like in Australia. When asked a question about respecting the identities of trans pupils in schools, she admitted she wasn't comfortable advising on that topic, but suggests now would be a good time to update policy and said, quote, "Look at Sex Matters websites is usually what I say to people when I don't know the answer." Of course, Reindorf was speaking in an unofficial capacity, but I feel there's a lot to learn from that. Snagging exceptions in the law, like pulling apart knitwear until it's more than a hole than anything.
So, fucking
Frickin'
Reindorf.
Reindorf.
Man. Just, yeah. She's a complete Reindorf. Which is an insult I'm trying to work in. So look out for that. We're seeing somebody getting described as a total Reindorf. Still yet to work out exactly what it means. Someone who's belligerent in their hostility for no qualified reason.
Oh god, yeah, the Labour Woman Declaration touting tote bag in the LGBT alliance.
Oh, well, that was
yeah,
her, wasn't it? Yeah,
that was me. I got that photo. I've been flouting that. Anytime she's mentioned, I put that photo on our Blue Sky. Every time.
Yeah. It was my first article as well for What the Trans. It's so yeah. I don't know. The idea of someone in her position, well no, the reality of someone in her position saying, "Look at Sex Matters website" is usually what I say to people. Can I get off the ride now? I want to get off. I feel sick. Stop.
Yeah.
It's like, look at Stonewall's website, am I right?
Or look at the EHRC website.
You know, the one that you actually work at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, so from somebody who works at the EHRC and definitely shouldn't, comes someone who does not work at the EHRC and definitely shouldn't. So, in the avalanche of news this week from both sides of the Atlantic, something we didn't see many media organisations cover was the fact that Labour have let it be known about their top choice for who should be the chair of the EHRC when Kishwa Faulkner gets her marching orders in however long it takes. The suggestion is Dr. Mary Ann Stevenson, and as soon as that name was made known, there were a lot of trans people pushing back against it. Why? Well,
I'm glad you asked. My suspicions were first aroused
when she signed an open letter where a selection of middle-aged, middle-class academics were bleating on and on about how people kept calling them transphobic to silence them. Which is funny because, as I'm sure you've heard, a lot of people who get called transphobes just never shut the fuck up. The letter from February 2015 is called "We Cannot Allow Censorship and the Silencing of Individuals," and Stevenson's name appears near the bottom of the list of signatories. Okay, so what? So she signed one open letter with an inflammatory title. It could have been an honest mistake. I'm glad you pointed that out, me. Dr. Ruth Pierce, whose work we've cited before, she's awesome, check her out, had this to say on social media. Mary Ann Stevenson was very active in feminist politics in Coventry during the 2010s. I can confirm she is extremely transphobic, although she always kept her nastiest comments behind closed doors. This proposed appointment should be resisted in the strongest possible terms. In another post, Pierce said, "I sat in a room with Mary Ann and as an actual trans woman heard her bigotry and heard her try and gaslight myself and everyone else in the room about it. I have seen the letters that she signed supporting transphobic causes. I have seen her organisations oppose trans people's civil rights." And finally, another post from Pierce made it nice and blunt and said Stevenson's entire career has been discrimination against women is bad. It should stop. Unless it's against those women. Their pain and suffering doesn't count. Actually, maybe we could make it worse. She spoke at the Women's Place UK conference in 2020 alongside Kathleen Stock and Helen Joyce. In 2023, she donated actual money to LGB Alliance founder Alison Bailey's legal case against the charity Stonewall. The pièce de résistance in all this, though, is Stevenson's own social media feeds, which shows she follows a whole laundry list of transphobic organisations and not a single LGBTQ+ or trans charity. There is no record of her speaking at or otherwise participating in conferences for LGBTQ+ organisations. There's no record of her speaking in support of LGBTQ+ communities, no record of her attending conferences of LGBTQ+ organisations, or even so much as speaking to them. here comes the new boss, same as the old boss.
That's my reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what can we do? As mentioned at the top of the show, you can email the Women and Equalities Committee and the Joint Committee on Human Rights, who both have to approve her selection before it's made official. Email the members of the WNEC, although perhaps not Rosie Duffield.
Please.
Email the members of the JCHR. Send actual postal letters too if you can. We need to demonstrate that we can see what they're trying to do. Jess O. Thompson has written a very good letter and email template to get you started off, and I heartily recommend you use it. Please do not feed it into the plagiarism machine for reasons we'll come back to later. O. Thompson has already loudly requested people don't just run their letter template through an LLM. Linked on our website from this episode will be a selection of reading material about Stevenson and that letter template that I just mentioned. I know it's one more thing to protest, but we have to at least try. We can't just roll over and let them shaft our entire future.
Yeah, so this is a bit shit.
Yeah, a little bit.
And by a bit shit, I mean, it's like, it is so, like, I don't know, like, you somehow picked someone who has an even worse track record than the person I thought you might pick, and I didn't have anyone in mind. I just thought that they would try and find someone who could feign neutrality a smidgen better, who could look less than absolutely bloodthirsty for us. I don't know. I thought they might give it some of that, you know, blue Labour veneer. And instead we've got very much already a full and out armchair activist. Get fucked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there were originally people's how there was, I think, from behind the scenes discussions, there was people trying to push, what was her name, Harriet Harman, as like one of the things. But from what I heard from other people, that got immediately poo-pooed by the Labour government. They were like, "Nah, not having that shit. We can't have that." And even then, we've heard doubts about her. But even then, fucking Miss Stevenson here.
Dr. Stevenson.
Dr. Stevenson.
Listen, lady.
Doctor!
Doctor.
Doctor Lady!
I'm sure she'd be very keen for you to use her title.
Yes, we've got to make sure that we use the appropriate title for people, even if we dislike them. Did you hear that? Anyway. More of the same, except from a new angle of fuckery. So we may have mentioned that the HRC have undertaken a new consultation into the updated code of practice since the supremacist court, the Supreme Court ruling. Just another spoke in the turning wheels of oppression. But fear not, we're going to take you through the latest updates and some ways you can respond to it, because there may be more than one. So, firstly, the consultation is open until 30th of June 2025. Now, the organisation Liberty are currently appealing the court decision after their initial legal action to extend the consultation to 12 weeks was lost. Now, why 12? Well, that has often been found as legally the minimum that is fair when regarding vulnerable groups. This is after the HRC tried to only give us 2, and then, oh so graciously, handed out 4 extra weeks, bringing it up to a speedy 6. At the time of recording, that's all we know on that, but hopefully we'll have more updates on this part of it soon. Now, that's also not the only legal challenge being made to the consultation either. Our best buds at this point, the Good Law Project, are yet again galloping in to fight for what's right. They have filed for judicial review against not only the HRC, but also Bridget Phillipson, the Equalities Minister. Queer AF got an exclusive look at the document, and in their article, they laid the whole thing out. So, according to them, GLP's argument is essentially that following the interim update would likely lead to breaking criminal law. And as such, the court should either call for its removal or declare it as directly opposing our obligations to the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, this primarily centres on the fact that despite claiming it is not guidance, it is clearly meant to act as guidance before they fully release actual guidance, even calling it a settled view of the law. And people have been acting on it like it is guidance, which goes directly against the words of the Supreme Court, who said that the ruling should not remove protections from trans people, regardless of their having a GRC or not, and that the ruling should not disadvantage any of us either.
But look at what's happened, huh? Within hours, people were being told they could not use facilities at work, some were having to leave their jobs temporarily, risk UTIs, the British Transport Police changing their strip search policy, the NHS removed their trans-inclusive guidance, leaving people with nothing until this new damned guidance. So the so-called clarity for cis people has meant complete confusion and total pandemonium for us, shunted back to the same legal limbo that persisted in this country until the case of Goodwin and the Gender Recognition Act that followed. But none of that is actually criminal law, is it? Well, it's because that part of it centres on a particular section of the Act that we just mentioned. Under the GRA, it is a criminal offence to out someone, specifically to gain protected knowledge on someone or learn their protected characteristics, and to disclose it to others without their permission. Now, with the EHRC talking about third spaces or using the toilet of the assigned sex at birth, well, in that scenario, you literally can't piss without everyone knowing your status. Because either way, you're someone who, A, appears to be one gender going into the loo of another, ergo most people may put two and two together and then clock you, or you're literally going to quote-unquote the trans loo. This means that if your employer is trying to do any of these things to you, you could possibly take them to court for discrimination or for the criminal offence of forcing you to out yourself in order to access facilities that they have to adequately provide for you. And you are legally entitled to access. Now, that's not saying, by the way, that you should just go and start immediately suing people. I'm just saying there is a legal argument being made that this could open up issues like this for service providers and for people. And so if you feel you have a case, go and seek legal counsel, you know? The Query F article also goes into further details, so we suggest that you check that out. But what can you do, right? Well, we all know that dealing with red tape is one of the quickest ways to burst a blood vessel, but Transactual, in partnership with Scottish Trans and Mermaids, have created 2 quick guides. One that is a quicker, more general read with some useful resources like the current draft code that the EHRC are consulting on, and then another more in-depth resource literally titled What Do I Say? It takes you through all of the options, what kind of questions there are, how long it might take. It really actually quite exhaustive stuff, and we have linked to both below. As we've said before, we encourage you to think long and hard. Do not be afraid to submit on the final couple of days if that is what it takes for you to properly process your thoughts and feelings. And feel free to write a lot, because they need to have overwhelming evidence, overwhelming data, so that they either have to include us or can be held to account for ignoring the majority of data that they have asked for because it did not suit their aims. And in case you thought they were done, no. The GLP have also made their own tool, which is kind of just a stripped-down version of the form itself, where you can leave contact details and a quote response in one text box, which will then automatically be forwarded over to the EHRC, which is just extra nice and nifty of them. However, before you complete the form, here's a couple of things we would like to point out now. 1, please bear in mind this is an EHRC-run form. They have set the terms of the discussion, and they now get to choose which responses count and which don't. The only way that we can influence this is by getting as many trans-supportive messages as possible from both trans people and our allies. We need to be able to submit this in such overwhelming numbers that it can't just be batted to one side. 2, keep a copy of your submission, the date, time you submitted, any evidence you can get of your submission for record keeping. 3, please try to find your own way of phrasing things rather than just copy-pasting suggested answers. The last government was known to just delete any duplicate responses from the final dataset. And I know it's more difficult this way, but we all need to use our own words as best as we can. Talk all proper like what we does, all right? But that leads me on to then another thing to mention. For the love of God, for all that is corrupt and unholy, please, 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 do not use the online tools that we inaccurately call AI. It just makes shit up. It'll put in references to case law that doesn't exist. And if nothing else, an AI is just an unethical plagiarism machine. Please do not use one. So, we focused a lot on the guidance, how to fill it in, etc., but we aren't done yet. There are some who have felt this is a lot of effort for us to go to, not to be listened to, which is a really valid perspective. And to be fully transparent with you, I have been in that place for a little while now. I've been very torn
on the effect of this, whether we'll be legitimizing the consultation with a response, even if we all respond, telling them that the whole thing needs to be scrapped. There is no way to bring clarity to the ways in which we should be cut out of society. You know, would all of that just be discarded and be for nothing? You know, Cal Horton has mentioned as much, including saying a collective boycott would perhaps be a good venture. But the title is a really good question worth considering. Are we sure? Are we sure this is the best tactic? That's something for every individual to decide. And I'll be honest, I've not seen much talk of boycott to the consultation, which inherently affects the likelihood of one to be effective. But it just feels like it would be irresponsible to ignore Cal's point. And I feel like we should consider things and make conscious decisions as opposed to just going along with the motions or what you think you see most people doing. So, you know, maybe we discuss that, because I genuinely have been kind of like, we keep saying involve us, so we want to be involved. Just what does that actually mean for us in the future? Like, a lot of it is anxiety you can't resolve until you see the result of what they've done. But I don't know, for me it feels really obvious that regardless of what we say or do, they aren't going to listen. But I also understand that that is not the only goal with this, right? That there is also the goal of making such a strong and undeniable record that, you know, it's clearly them working with their own political aims and objectives.
Yeah, so I suppose on the boycott side of things, I suppose if you want to boycott but feel like you're going to do something that's going to be effective, I think we've seen some really good results in emailing people's MPs. We've had lots of good results of, like, we've seen upcoming Women Inequalities Committee thing. We've seen a large outpour in, like, you know, the self-ID debate on the petitions a while back. So even if you're not sure about doing the EHRC specifically, there's still, it might be important to still give that bit a go, so you can still at least do some writing and put some of your spoons into that if needed.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know where I'm coming down on it. I think I will submit to it, if just to get a few things off my chest. You know, like, it feels like shouting into the void.
Yeah.
But equally, the void needs a good talking to sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm not necessarily submitting it for the EHRC so much as for me to just sort of write all of the stuff, all of the thoughts I've got out, and then say, look, you asked for this, and here is why I think you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So I think I will fill it out. However, Cal's point is valid, right? The EHRC get to set the parameters of this. As far as they're concerned, they've already decided the legal aspects of it.
Yeah.
So anybody disputing the legal aspects of it and saying the law should be changed and whatever, they're not going to pay any attention to that because that's outside of the scope of what they're asking for. It's incredibly frustrating. I think if you're having trouble with it, you might want to have a look at the Good Law Project tool, because that's just fill in one text box and done. Where have you come down on it? Since you wrote this in the last few hours, what do you think about it, Flint?
Well, I wrote most of this before seeing the Women Inequalities Committee, which did change some things for me, actually.
Yes.
It did bring me slightly towards the idea of maybe submitting is better than not, purely because I think that if there is not an overwhelming amount, right? If there's only a pittance, a smattering, then they get to say, we didn't engage, so we must have been fine with it. You know, they get to spin whatever narrative they want. But if they're put in a position where they have to discount the majority of what people have been saying, they may have to justify that. That's something you can FOI, right? That's something you'd be able to FOI. So
indeed,
that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. I'm coming at it less a case of, do I think they're going to listen? No. Do I think it's going to change anything in the immediate? No. Do I think that it is better to have a record of our complete disagreement so that when they probably inevitably do what the fuck they want anyway and disregard what we're saying, we have the receipts and we could be able to say to them, you have ignored, 70% of all of the submissions that were made. And even if you can say, well, it's because they're outside of the parameters, do you not think that shows how piss poor of a job you've been doing? And that's the thing. They can justify it by saying, well, it didn't fit the parameters. But you can't ignore, it's going to be hard or harder for the Women and Equality Select Committee to that's going to be something they can question them on. And I would not have considered that worth anything had I not seen them actually kind of grilling her for once. And I'd not seen that before. And we keep talking about it before we get into it properly. Sorry about that. We're really teasing you, babes. Yeah. Seeing them actually be like, well, my constituents have said this and my constituents have said that, and I've had these many people say that they're concerned. Okay, so writing to MPs actually seems to be working. Holy shit, I genuinely wasn't sure on that one.
Yeah.
The amount of they were asking the right kind of questions in the right kind of way, unless you were a couple of people that are on the panel. And that makes me think that if we put them in a bit of a corner, that there may be a chance for the Women and Equality Select Committee to question them on that. And that to me holds more weight than the notion that they're actually going to do anything decent. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And that may change. That may change, but...
make the fuckers squirm.
There's plenty of time for you to change your mind. So I've just looked ahead, and June the 30th is not only the submission date of the consultation, at the moment at least, unless it gets extended by another 6 weeks, but it is also the date our next podcast is due to come out. So the one after this one. Yeah. The one after this one should release on the 30th. So we're not gonna be able to talk about it much more than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's fair. And can we talk for a second as well, very, very briefly, about the fact that all of this is only going to come to an end at the end of Pride Month? All of this you're doing during Pride Month, during Pride season, extra salt in the wound. I know it probably wasn't deliberate. It fucking feels it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. I think we've teased it enough.
Yes.
So let's talk about the Women and Equality Select Committee meeting that took place on June the 11th.
Oh, gosh. It's so much fun watching someone have a bad day.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes.
Not every somebody, but these somebody.
Yeah. I will say 99.9% of the time, it's kind of rough watching someone have a bad day. You just want to give them a pick-me-up or something. But when it's someone like this, I'm getting the cocktails out. Yeah.
Yep. Pass me the margaritas.
Yeah. Do you like pina coladas?
You could play a drinking game with some of the things here as well on words being said, but you'd be
clarity.
Please don't. Don't. You'll end up in A&E and you'll be waiting for 12 fucking hours just for a fucking saline IV. Please don't.
Yeah, don't do that. Would not recommend.
No.
Just in case people haven't necessarily been as glued to social media as we are. So Kishwa Faulkner and the chief exec of the Equality and Human Rights Commission were pulled in front of the Women and Equality Select Committee, and so they were questioned significantly. It wasn't just kind of waving everything through. They really did ask them some searching questions to which they did not have ready answers.
No.
And there were a few things that are significant and are not good, but there's been a few other things where, well, they were schadenfreude-tastic, basically.
There was a few moments where Faulkner said something and there was just silence in the room because everyone went, what did she really fucking say that? It
also started off on an immediately tense tone because they started off with the very first question being like, how are you going to rebuild public trust when so many people have said they've lost faith in you? And she immediately was like, well, I disagree with that characterization, and just immediately went into it. There was no chillness. It was like, all right, we've got you pinned. How long until you tap out?
No, exactly. I mean, on that, let's start off on that point about that statistic point, because when she answered that question, she went to say that the trust in the HRC went from 30% to about 81% satisfaction rate on how they're doing, but the question is, she didn't tell us where the hell she pulled that out from.
No.
Yeah.
Or like,
Where's that statistic
statistics?
from, Kishwa?
I made it the fuck up.
Did you get it from Sex Matters or?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like my personal speculation, and it is just a speculation, right? I am farting in the wind on this one. I feel like it possibly has, something to do with having really friendly relationships with hate groups that are really great at organising things like mass emailings and whatnot.
Yes.
Just a kooky little theory, no real reason.
So let's rattle through some of the things that were said. So Faulkner is not as good as she hoped at kind of ducking the question, but she also flat out said intersex people have no legal protection under law. They didn't look at the impact to intersex people when drafting any of their guidance. Intersex people haven't been considered at all.
And you'd have thought, you know what? Intersex people don't have protection. What the fuck? They need protection. They need some kind of thing to prevent them from being discriminated, and maybe perhaps some new legislation. But over and over again, the EHRC kept rejecting, saying that they should be the ones to dictate equality law and how they interpret it, and that no new legislation needs to be or should be put in because there's clarity.
Well, okay, so she said that we're the people who, we bring out the guidance that everybody else then abides by, but then she said of the interim update shouldn't have been followed, and that service providers should instead refer to their lawyers.
Yeah.
So which is it?
Yeah, because also, what are the fucking lawyers going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's supposed to regulate this?
Yeah.
We're going to tell you. We're gonna make you go to your lawyers to see what they think, but then when you do it wrong, we're gonna pull you up on it. But we're gonna tell you what it is that you've got wrong until you've done it.
And yeah, there's also another on the point of like completely avoiding responsibility whilst also claiming to be like, the biggest and best in the room. There's one moment where she says, we're in a slight danger of shooting the messenger, and it's like, babe, you're not just the messenger. You've literally just said that you make the decisions on how these things are practically applied. You are the people through which, we are meant to understand how the law works. You don't get to be that and then also be just the messenger. That's not it. And then there was this other moment, this whole other moment where she she makes a really silly mistake. And I want to be clear, this is a flub. This is not some, oh my God, mask off moment of what she really thinks. Because first of all, it's really fucking clear what she really thinks. We don't need silly tripping up of words to prove that point. But it was something that really made me chuckle when there's a moment where she says,
and we will ensure, in terms of enforcement, that we enforce the fact that trans people should have nowhere, should not have any service which doesn't provide them with facilities that they might be able to use.
And it's like, it is genuinely just a silly slip of the tongue because she's having to answer these questions and whatnot. It's really funny when she says that, and it sounds more natural than the shit that she's actually trying to say. But it's I don't know, it's just something that made me chuckle. But yeah, bearing in mind, she's just the messenger. That's all the EHs are. They're just the messenger. She then answers a question.
Orders sent from the court, right?
Well, yeah, she's just the messenger, but she also then says in a question later, like literally a question or two later, that she's proud of the fact that the EHRC has, quote, led the charge for course correction, meaning correcting us having rights to us having no rights. And obviously it's with the notion that they're like, nah, well, you've not actually lost any rights, you've been lied to, whatever. You've been gleefully leading the charge on that. Shame on you.
I think there was a point where she then gleefully boasted, we know that the last chair was a Stonewall executive previously.
Yeah.
And now it's... and I was like, and you are, babes?
Yeah.
And you are what?
So you're different, are you?
Are you saying that you're the yang to the yin? Because then that's not That's not saying what I think you think it's saying. Whatever.
Yeah, it's not the flex you think it is. So she speaks about the Glasgow meeting at the Glasgow office of the EHRC, saying it had to be cancelled because of serious risk of violence. However, firstly, that protest was widely documented, and you can see people are just chanting with signs and doing, normal protest things. And stewards were present keeping pathways clear, and people who were able to enter and exit the building with no problem. And also the meeting was scheduled a whole 2 weeks before a protest where police assaulted protesters. So who is it that's the violent ones again? Who is it that's the lying ones again? Come on, figure it out.
Figure it out.
Yeah, that one was absolutely...
Figure it out.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. You figure it out. You
Figured out. Figured out. Figured out. Figured out.
So I suppose on the protesting that, it sounds like if you protest the HRC at their offices, they're going to notice, and it's going to really piss them off. That's the main takeaway I keep getting from this. They're going to file injunctions at their office buildings. They're going to complain about it at the Women and Equalities Committee. It's going to stay rent-free in their heads.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get your message heard, they're going to really have it stuck in their heads.
Yeah,
Piss them off.
And
That's
there's another point as well where she claims that the Supreme Court ruling only covered people with a GRC, just over 8,000 people, and that's even from the way they've written the interim updates and shit like that, just doesn't seem to be true. So I don't know what you're trying to say there. It's just this constant flip-flopping. At one point she'll say victimhood is not how I think of things, and we shouldn't weigh up one person's rights against another's, but then we'll often bring up the need to balance rights, including that it is up to the individual services employees to weigh up that balance. And John Kirkpatrick, by the way, the other guy, the CIO, I think is that chief officer, we shouldn't let him off the hook too. We shouldn't focus too much on just Faulkner because he's also in there doing bullshit. He literally uses that language, directly contradicting earlier points that they make of it's bad to play a game of who's more deserving of rights.
There's always these sections where they were talking about how sex rights activists argued it politely and through proper channels and only did their legal cases when absolutely necessary, while then framing trans activists as these violent, thuggish people who, are scary and we don't like them. You could see how they were landing just on their intentions with how they were comparing people.
And then we get to the really big shit, the Article 8 shit.
Yes.
At first, there's a point where they're asked, does the ruling affect Article 8? And has it created a categorization of a third sex that Lady Howard warned against? She was thinking in the Goodwin case. And Faulkner literally says the Equality Act was rushed through and should be reviewed. Even if that's the case, I wouldn't trust you to review it. And then she refused to give names of what external legal counsel they proactively sought out, or what groups, what trans advocacy groups or whatever they proactively sought out. Because at one point they're listing off people and they've got, Sex Matters and For Women Scotland and then Stonewall and Transactual. And they make a very good point of, okay, which of these people did you go out of your way to directly hear from versus the people that have come to you? And she refuses to answer. She says, I'll send you a letter about it. I.e., I'm not going to say that in a public space.
So she was also asked to clarify that the EHRC will not try to argue that the Supreme Court got it wrong or admit that they themselves may have interpreted the ruling wrong. And in her answer, she makes this weird reference to Churchill, right? And this potentially apocryphal quote about voters, right? So she's referencing a Churchill quote, which it seems that he didn't actually say, but it's kind of something attributed to him from the 90s onwards. Apparently, the quote is, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with your average voter." So if that's what she's referencing, which we think it is, yikes, right? That is awful and dystopian as fuck. It's also an apocryphal comment that popped up 30 years after his death, according to Snopes.
Yeah.
So that's not an argument for her incompetence or anything. This is just this kind of misattribution is so common, it's more weird that she would bring that up in this context.
Yeah.
She's basically saying, oh, well, when we get our consultation results in, it's going to make you disbelieve in democracy.
Yeah, or it's something like that. Like I'm still mulling this one over. I feel like what she was trying to say, because the question seemed to be along the lines of like, you know, if enough people tell you that you're wrong, will you ever like admit that? I can't remember the exact wording of the question now, which is, you know, my bad. I'm pretty sure the person asking it was one of the more transphobic leaning people on the panel, who was basically like, can we confirm that you will not, you know, under any circumstances try and argue that the Supreme Court got it wrong or this, that, the other. And it's basically asking for assurance. This is for real. So to bring up that in relation to that is like, I don't know, it feels like she was trying to say, lol, that's what the average voters think, and I'm never going to listen to them or agree with them because the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Which, like...
Yeah.
Part of your whole job, babes, but whatevs.
Yeah, how are we going to trust you with a consultation if you've already going to disregard what the average person thinks or what an average response from your consultation is going to be?
It's such a snobbish response as well, saying, oh, well, you can't trust the average man in the street.
Yeah, and it's the way that she's also like, I won't say it because it's unparliamentary language. Please.
Well, you're pointing at it. You're literally saying it, even without saying it. That is unparliamentary language by just referencing and saying that's what I think.
So she said that, oh, well, I don't know what time we're going to be going on till, but I can't stay much past 4:30. And she gets told, maybe make your responses briefer. And should I bring you to a close when I feel you've gone off topic?
Yeah. And unfortunately, after that is the big moment that you will have seen everywhere. It is the moment where she is directly challenged on Article 8, which is the right to privacy. And she says, we don't think that Article 8 rights apply, and neither does the Supreme Court.
Christine's only going to say that specific first answer about asking people, is that not a breach of their privacy in the first place? And that kind of makes the point that I think has been behind everybody's questioning today, is that there is a basic right which is being undermined.
That's a yes or a no question. Is it a breach of privacy?
We don't think Article 8 rights apply. Neither did the Supreme Court, and neither has previous legal advice that we've taken on that area apply.
So if she truly believes that, then she clearly isn't aware of this exact paragraph in the actual ruling itself, which is paragraph 48, stating, the court reiterates that the right to respect for private life under Article 8 of the Convention extends to gender identity as a component of personal identity. This holds true for all individuals, including transgender people who have not undergone gender reassignment treatment or do not wish to undergo such treatment. So yeah. Actually, straight up factually wrong and lying. That is really fucking dangerous. That is really bad. That is her literally saying, we do not have human rights. And in response to that, you know, one of the members of the team, Sammy, said, whatever the specific mental gymnastics, it's concerning to hear the head of an equalities body keep finding circumstances where people don't have rights. Which, thanks, Sammy, because you put it far more eloquently than I could.
A lot more diplomatically, yeah. I would have. Whenever I've been talking about the HRC, I always constantly bring up how the HRC is run, how you got the chairs, but more specifically, who appoints these chairs and who, how the HRC is run with its funding. It's not done independent, because that puts serious questions on its independence, because if the government puts their funding, if they don't go in step with the government, the government could instantly say no funding for you, or all right, we're going to change out who's the chair because we don't like you anymore. And they have to dance to that tune. And when this was actually brought up near the end of it, Faulkner didn't really address it properly. They say they haven't assessed the financial impact on people getting into compliance. No, sorry. They didn't really approach it and really sort of dodged the question and sort of said, "Oh, we are independent," but then didn't really properly address the funding situation.
Yeah, indeed. And what she also said, Mr. Kirkpatrick said, the cost of compliance with the law is the cost of compliance with the law. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yeah. It's, my literal response when I heard that was, oof. 'Cause, like, that just feels like a go fuck you. That feels like, fuck you. Fuck you for asking. Fuck you for wanting to know the financial implications of what we're demanding you do to exclude your fellow human. And I mean, and one of the final questions that was asked, they're asked about the data clause. This is from, actually, it's from one of the people on the panel that seems to be more, as I said, transphobe aligned. I cannot remember her name right now.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you. And This is not an insult. This is genuinely just an observation because this actress is damn talented. But she looks weirdly similar to the actress that plays the woman in Hot Fuzz who's in the amateur dramatics production of Romeo and Juliet with the really, really annoying laugh. So yeah, she looks a bit like Eve Draper. She brings up the data breach issue. Is like, have you told government about this? Are you letting government know about this? And you know, she literally says it's allowing self-ID through the back door. The response is that they have spoken to government about the data clause. She said they've raised the issue, and then she specifically asked, is government receptive? And she sort of dodges that and goes, well, I can't comment on the on the read of the room, so to speak, but they were already well aware of the issue. So that's another yikes. And then after that, or pretty soon after that, they closed up. They said, you know, we've still got a lot of questions to get through, but you have to go away, apparently. So they agreed that they would send out the rest via letter, and I hope that those are publicly available letters.
They should be.
They should be. And we will, if oh God, if our central nervous systems can actually fucking hack it, then we will look through, of course, the rest of that and do, you know, the similar things of what we've done here.
Yeah. So there were a couple of parts of this, like specifically when she was talking about Article 8, where it's like, oh no,
yeah,
it just kind of makes you hang your head. But there were more parts of this really where Faulkner just got wrecked. Yeah, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, the woman's, because there was like the whole bit about they went into the toilet exclusion sections, and they went, it's rather ambiguous, when in reality, in their own fucking guidance, they put it out in clear black and white.
Yeah, yeah.
And they specifically said that you can't have a trans-inclusive women's walking club, saying that's illegal now.
Just anything trans-inclusive, illegal, pretty much. Anyway, fuck 'em.
Fuck 'em. We're done.
So, we're done.
You heard all the information. You got through it all. We're so proud of you.
No, so make sure you sync up as best as you can, Ambers.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's do some trans joy. Now, I suggest we rattle through these as quickly as we can, because there's loads of them, okay? Okay, so Rachel says, my trans joy is that, holy shit, I get to be a girl, which, yeah, relatable.
Kit, he said, I'm this close to owning the house I'm currently renting. Hey!
Paisley says, I'm helping run a first-time local pride event this weekend. Nice one.
Bex says that my trans joy is that I am now almost a month on E. I'm really enjoying starting to get the right hormones in my body. And yes, I remember being just about a month on estrogen. And congratulations, and the emotional changes will start hitting you like a ton of bricks in a couple of weeks.
Yes, and Christina, in the past 3 days, they've gone from having one dead name debit card to having no more dead name debit cards, and instead have 3 debit cards in her actual name. Congratulations!
Woo! And Miles Per Hour says, my mom called me her son the other day. We haven't spoken in 6 years. And that makes my heart fucking sing. So, nice one, dude. Genuinely. That's beautiful. Yeah.
MX Spectrum says, my trans joy lately is seeing my friends dance and gush about their progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Old Testament Garfield, love that name. Just finished my part. Finished my part.
Jesus.
Just visited my partner. Also trans.
It just sounded like you said, I just finished my partner. I'm like, whoa!
Yes.
Whoa! TMI!
No, just visited my partner, also trans.
Yeah. Yeah, and May says, I got my ears pierced last weekend. I'm so happy with them. Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Melissa Poulton says, performing poetry like I will be tonight.
And Rowan said they started tea about a week ago and it's made me feel like 20% happier and much more chill.
Wait.
Or chill out, yeah.
Arthur says, how trans-related does it have to be, lol? I've just finished my final assignment for my college course, so that's pretty awesome. As long as I don't fail it, it means that I'm heading to uni in September. Also, it means I never have to do another psychology assessment ever again in my entire life, which I'm so relieved about. Amazing. Congratulations.
Yes. And Laura, I've now legally changed my name.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry,
what are you doing?
I dropped the cue.
Wow.
And Lauren says, I have now legally changed my name and come out at work. It's gone better than I could have dreamt, and I finally get to go to work as me. No issues from colleagues so far, and actually many other women and senior women colleagues have reached out and said they support me. Most said they are more worried about getting it wrong and upsetting me, which is blowing my mind in the current climate.
And Luna said, just scored myself the most caring and supportive partner ever.
Love that. And then Vilma says, I have made the best friend of my entire life. She's also trans. I'm so much happier now. I'm happy that I can finally be myself. She has helped me a lot, like very, very much. Nice.
Cirque du Shelley says, today I got help from a lady to carry a heavy box because she saw me struggling. I can't pick up heavy things anymore, and she said I was cute. Yeah.
Nice.
Zombie Enthusiast said, today I found an intersex community. My life is complete. People who get me. Oh, I have also been making more art than ever these days. It's grunge, punk stuff, turned a leaf and found my style, and it's queer and angry. And
nice,
sure
yes,
angry.
dude, fucking feel it. I love that shit, and I hope to see some of this artwork because I myself am fond of the grunge punk trans shit. Also, people on social media talking about cis men's chests in boob terms actually gave me gender euphoria about my chest. I can't believe that a gif of Chris Evans jogging with the caption, "Give this man a bra," radically changed my mindset, but it did! Phenomenal.
And that last one was from Winter.
Oh, yes, sorry.
The next one is from Jess Kate Socks. I saw my friend today in Morrison's and had a little 5-minute catch-up. It made my day.
Wait.
Good.
And Laura, Queen of Seagulls. They've started electrolysis for now to banish the beard for good.
And Morwen says, I have a Trans Pride Committee meeting to attend this evening, and I'm off to a different Trans Pride this weekend. Way!
Tony Widmo says, my trans joy is being like a mother figure for younger trans locals and learning from my local trans elders. Nice.
Yes.
And Make It Rain, I've been on estrogen for about 5 months. My face is way more soft and I'm both happy and at peace.
The Ezra Terrestrial, sick name, dude,
I love that.
says, went swimming in a public pool for the first time since getting top surgery. Kept my swim top on and took my wife for moral support, but I did it and I'm super proud of myself. That's amazing. That takes so much confidence. Props.
Yeah.
Serious props. I've not been swimming in years.
Han L says, I work in a toy shop and I was restocking Harry Potter Lego. Surprised your hands didn't burn. When a couple walked by, looked at them, then one turned to the other and said, we're not buying that, don't want to give her any more money to take away trans rights, which brought a huge smile to my face.
Yeah.
See, the cis are sometimes all right.
And Bonnie said, longer one, but my therapist loved this story. I'm a trans woman and this happened at work about a month ago. I'm about 6 months into HRT. I was making a hot drink and stumbled a little because I'm kind of clumsy, but I steadied myself, chuckled, shook my head and started stirring my drink. As I did, so I thought, wow, I love being me. Then I stopped dead and had another thought. I don't think I've ever had that thought before. That's a new thought. Wow. I've carried that joy forward ever since and basked in it and reflected it back at me multiple times after telling other people the story.
I love that. It's beautiful because I remember the first time that I remember properly thinking, oh, I'm actually kind of enjoying life at the minute, and it's world changing. It's fucking world changing. Fungal Art Person, wonder who that is, says, I got a cheap Nintendo Switch a few days ago, excited to play and stream with it. Also learning kanji and feeling big-brained. Nice one.
And Melissa says, I've sung alto in a gay choir for a few years, and my voice has gone stronger in my upper range, and my vocal dysphoria is basically gone. Yay! Choir is great voice training. At practice this week, we had loads of altos, and the lead needed to rebalance things. So I sang both bass and owned my bottom range, and for the first time, soprano. There's no way at all I could have done that when I started, but I properly sang a soprano part. That was a proper gender euphoria moment, which is kind of rare 6 years into transition. Hell yeah!
I remember seeing you do your choir work in Extra Pride, and you did great. And on to the next one from Anonymous. My kid, a 12-year-old non-binary, chose the name they want to use in the future and told me, I'm so proud of them in general. They've grown into such a sweet and caring person. I love getting to know them. It feels like they're really maturing into their own person. I'm so happy for them.
I love that, and I'm so glad that your kid trusts you that way, and it's also just nice to hear about parents getting it right. That's good for the soul, and it's healing. And that's all the trans joy we've got for you at the minute.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more of that in a couple of weeks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll speak to you soon. See you next time. Toodaloo. This episode of What the Trans was produced and presented by Flint, Ashleigh and Alyx, and written by Sammy, Flint, Ashleigh and Alyx. It was edited by Amber Devereaux and Amber Roberts, and our opening theme music was composed by Waritsara Yui Carlberg. Our episode thumbnail artwork was created by Apoa Piers, and transcription performed by Sam Wyman, Rowan B., Rachel Aldred, and Georgia Griffiths. We would especially like to thank our producer-level Patreons, who are Willow Allison Hutt,
Katie Cox,
Levi Hart, hi!
Juby,
Zoe B,
Michael Jarjo, apologies if that's wrong.
Danielle Hardwick,
Ocean,
Mel,
Heather Patterson,
Brianne O'Neill,
Toby,
Gauze Star,
Susan K. Quinn,
Undead Narfa,
Ellie,
Bex the Mermaid,
Brian Goss,
Hazel Dust,
Laura, Queen of Seagulls,
Becky Cheadle,
Jordan Starr,
Lee Downs,
Lindsay Cannon,
George Simmons,
Carly Silvers,
B Squared,
Smiley, friend of Candy from across the pond,
the Socialist Party of Great Britain, 1904,
Sarah,
Eris,
Tin Roof,
Naystrom,
Lex Phoenix. Hi, honey.
A hilarious joke from a podcast you don't listen to. I don't really listen to podcasts.
Andrea Brooks. I'm sorry, I love that. A hilarious joke from it. That's chef's kiss. Andrea Brooks.
Jack Edwards.
Orion Matrix.
No Art.
Needles and Threads.
Flaming Daphne.
Dr. McGee.
Jen.
Katie Reynolds.
Georgia Holden Burnett.
Grabilicious.
Muxophon.
Root -1.
Gray.
Beth Anderson.
Bernice Roust.
Ellen Meller.
Jay Hoskins.
Trowan.
Ashleigh.
Set Cab.
Jane.
Roberto de Prunk.
Rose Absolute.
Sarah.
Cena.
Kiki T.
D.
Sky Killane.
Eric Widman.
B.
Jude.
Monsieur Squirrel.
Fergus Evans.
Anubis Jackal.
Brandon Craig.
Break the System.
Sean Phillips.
Heidi Reardon.
Lentil.
Clara Volume.
Amelia.
Samantha Raven.
Tabitha Jo Cox, a.k.a. Candy.
Fiona McDonald.
Murgatroyd.
Ontologically Unjust.
Stella.
Cindergoza.
Rebecca Prentice.
Crazy Richard.
didn't even hear a syllable of that. It was that crazy. Dan Oblivion.
Helen _
El Grey.
Melody Nix.
Fiona Punchard.
John.
CB Bailey.
Gordon Cameron.
Ted Delphos.
Kai Lewin.
Vic Parsons.
Patreon user.
Vic Kelly.
Catherine.
Sabrina McVeigh.
Cassius Adair.
Melissa Brooks.
Kraken 12.
April Heller.
Sophie Lewis.
Alexandra Lilly.
Claire Scott.
Ariadne Pena.
Laura Anayans.
Bernard's Jink Pellybean? No. Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean.
And Lenos. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to get this right. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you did it. You did. Thank you for listening. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Well done. Remember to water your pets and neuter your plants. I'm sorry. We're so late in the evening. I'm so ADHD right now.
I was supposed to go to bed 10 minutes ago.
Fucking liberals.